If you wouldn't mind migrating over to ESPN if you're watching on TNC, just pump those numbers up for our Disney paymasters. Gotta please Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse is very desperate to get the average 300 viewers that we bring him each week. All right. Well, look, let us know if we are on ESPN YouTube because there's no way for us to check it mid-show. Look, after that absolute disaster of a start, let's talk about... Look, I'm wearing a Spanish football jersey, and there's a big question that always happens in Spanish football, which is, Liga. Do we have league? And that was the big question today. When the Wanderers were 1-0 up against Melbourne City, I thought to myself, we have league. This is it. It wasn't pretty. I believe the Wanderers had one shot in the first half, which they scored from. Beautiful goal from Brendan Borrello. And very nice assist from Remy Nadjarine. And I believe Melbourne City had about 15 at halftime. Towards the end, it was something like 30 shots to 3 or something outrageous. They managed to hold on to a 1-1 draw. So I have to ask, do we have league, Josh?
I mean, we have a little bit of league. We've got like I mean, you know who will be having a lot of league soon is Graham Arnold, but we'll get into that later. Melbourne City are fallible. They're not invincible, as invincible as they might seem. I still think they're going to take the title, but if a few sides like Western Sydney can chip away at them, honestly, Central Coast is best placed. And who would have said that in preseason? Not many people. I mean,
who would have said that any time after 2015 or whenever they were last in the finals? It's interesting. And you know what? It was funny. Like at the start of the game, watching it, just Melbourne City were just carving them open. And Matthew Leckie looked, outstanding. His dribbling was really good. Telio was getting into good positions. Obviously, Jamie McLaren scored in 10 games in a row. So, you kind of thought he was going to do that. And then totally against the run of play, just one counterattack. It was a very hot day out in Western Sydney today. Remy Nadjarine set up Brandon Borrello for a really good goal. And then you kind of thought, Wanderers have enough quality to kind of see this out. But God, they sat deep. And I saw a little bit on social media. Their fans look frustrated because they couldn't get out of their own box. Like they defended well, definitely, to kind of restrict City to one goal. And even though City had a lot of shots, they weren't huge, clear-cut chances. Lawrence Thomas wasn't, saving them every time. They defended well on the edge of the box, but do you expect a little bit more from the Wanderers when you have someone like Neuenhoff in that midfield? And, this isn't Real Madrid or Barcelona going to a tiny team with 1/15 of the budget. It's a salary cap league. The first team and the third team should be a little bit more even place, especially if Wanderers at home.
I think as soon as Marco Redan signed on as Wanderers coach, the first few performances we thought, he's just, trying to scrap some results early and then he's going to build towards something. Now that was the blueprint. Like it hasn't gone anywhere from there. It's just got more, ideologically rigid from that standpoint. And that's how they've pulled off their biggest scalps of the season. Remember the away win against Victory at Amy Park early on was really setting up the bunker. And that's the way they play. I'm not expecting anything else from the Wanderers now because that's what I've seen pretty much every game so far this season against opposition who actually want the ball, or even opposition that don't. It's funny. There's a school of thought in basketball, actually, in the NBA, which is how do you stop the star players? And sometimes coaches will say, we got to stick to our team defensive principles and just guard them like anybody else. And other coaches will say, actually, I'm going to send a double and I'm going to let the other guys hurt us. I'm going to give up shots and give up opportunities to maybe the lesser lights so that we can stop the main attraction, so that we can get, two people onto Steph Curry when he's taking a three. And that is sort of what Western Sydney Wanderers did to Jamie McLaren. They gave up a lot of shots. They gave up a lot of chances. If you look at the shot map for this, it's an absolute joke. It was 31 shots to 2. But Jamie McLaren didn't have too many of them, and he didn't have good chances in good positions. Yes, Tilio had a golden opportunity with that header. Lecky had a few.
Also hit the
few runs.
post,
Yes.
Tilio with a good run.
Yeah, so they were unlucky. The 2.35 XG, like most days, and it's hard to extrapolate XG from one game, but most days that's enough to win a game. But their XG per shot was only 0.07. So that's not very high. It's not terrible, but it's not very high. So that they didn't have a lot of high quality opportunities. They had a high volume of them, and Wanderers basically sat narrow, and they doubled McLaren, or got as many players around him as possible, so that the chances weren't falling to him. Yeah. And they were happy to give up shots to other players like Van der Ven, who eventually pulled something out of the top drawer, which we weren't really expecting on his left foot. But look, in terms of expectations for the Wanderers, this is clearly how Redan has decided he wants to play. So I'm not expecting them to change from here into... And have any of the Wanderers sides that have actually been good been based on free-flowing football through their existence? I mean, the Tony Popovich team in season 1 was one of the most unattractive sides to watch ever. It was just compelling because they were new team, amazing fan base, awesome atmosphere, and they were comprised of a whole bunch of like offcuts from other teams, so you weren't expecting them to make the title challenge that they did.
Run the Memes, who's a Wanderers fans, pretty succinctly says football terrorism. So there you go.
So I didn't need to talk for 4 minutes there, did I? I could have just used 2 words.
The thing is interesting about like that, and from the Wanderers fans thing is like, and this always comes back to my fundamental thing with the A-League, and it's something that you said on this pod, and I always think about it is, does this game matter, and also are the fans having a good time? Now, this game definitely mattered because, we were saying it could have brought us league. At 1-0, it brought us into a 3-horse race for the league, and that was very exciting, and I was really getting into it at that stage. But, I do wonder today, like, the Wanderers fans, they went out there in 32-degree heat. They watched their team get absolutely battered for 90 minutes. They didn't get that elation of holding on to a 1-0 win against the league leaders and really kind of like, we stole one against you. They have this kind of 1-1 draw. And I just wonder for the health of the, for the team, for the game, do the Wanderers need to be more expansive? And when would they even get more results? Because there was a stage where even at 1-0, when they were 1-0 up, they were sitting so deep so early in the game that you thought, this is a lot to sustain for 70 minutes, 60 minutes, 50 minutes. And then, of course, you think about what City can bring off the bench. Naboo came off the bench. Berenguer came off the bench. So they had a lot of quality as well, that even if they were able to keep out McLaren and Tilio and Lecky, there was reinforcements coming. So I do wonder of that approach from the Wanderers. Wanderers fans, let us know. 3 Happy Carrots says, Wanderers seem much better when Yengi is playing. Yeah, it's a decent shout. Blaine says, can we can this XG bollocks? It's the most nonsense stat. Blaine representing the old man football take. Blaine, what's wrong with XG?
I didn't realize Simon Hill had a burner on YouTube.
Simon Hill does not like XG. Well, Blaine, extrapolate on your comment, please. What is your issue with XG? I am a fan of XG. I think it's a good way. I think it is as good a way as not as good a way you're probably going to get, but as best way we have right now to extrapolate the quality of chances that a team is creating. And, there are other measurements, of course. There's shots on target, touches in the box, this type of thing. But I think it's not perfect. And I don't think you should say, they got XG this and this, XG this. But it's something that I think has improved, actually, the coverage of Australian football, the introduction of it through Channel 10 and Paramount's broadcast. But Josh, I know you just referenced it, but are you I assume you're an XG fan?
Yes. I think it probably is at the point of overuse now, and probably used out of context a lot of the time, as like, we're just going to use this one stat to say this team should have won. That like the XG philosophy account on Twitter, I think, is responsible for a lot of this, because they put out the number after every game. And then I think that's misleading to just have it like, I still look at it. I'm still interested. But over a 1-game sample size, it can be very misleading. But it's still really useful. And I think, honestly, like, we're past the point of arguing about it, because, the XG haters have already lost. It's already being used across media all across the world. And more importantly, it's being used by clubs in their analysis, in their scouting and recruitment. it's already taken over the game, really. And a lot of stats associated with it, like post-shot XG, which actually is a great measure for goalkeepers because it tracks where the shot's actually going in the net from where it was taken. And so it actually takes into account the quality of the finish and whether the goalkeeper would have been expected to save that or not.
Yeah.
So there's loads you can do with it. And also, like, expected assists is really interesting as well, because assists is an incredibly misleading stat, because as Garen Quoll found out for Hearts the other day, you're very much reliant upon your teammates' finishing ability when you tee them up for something. So 100%. Garen Quoll has something like 0.72 expected assists for Hearts now in his brief cameo.
Yeah. Look, XG, not perfect, but somewhat illuminating, a bit like this podcast. Lazar11 says, I see XG as more of a long-term stay, weeks, seasons, as opposed to a minute by minute or game to game. Yeah, I think it's not a bad thing over 10 games, kind of to get a bit of a sense where a team's going. Lewis F45-1 or 451, I'm not sure how you want to do that. He says it should be called quality of shot instead of expected goals. I do think it needs a bit of a rebrand would have helped. The word expected goals, I do think makes people think like, oh, so Melbourne City just expected to score 2 goals all the time or something. I do think a rebrand could have helped it.
Yeah, I think the name's bad. And I think that's why a lot of people hate it, is literally because of the name. I think that's spot on from Lewis. And shot quality would have been, if we could rewind time, I think shot quality, I reckon we would have been talking about SQ instead of XG.
Lewis, get in touch with the A-Leagues because you're a marketing genius, my friend. Angelo says, my XG is 3.25 expectations for girlfriends per night out. Don't know what that means, Angelo, but good luck in finding a date. Let Nick Stabano know.
That's very high.
3.25 girlfriends per night is a lot of texting, I would say.
I don't think anyone wants that.
Well,
that's a huge headache.
Look, just quickly, we should say as well, Van der Ven has retained the A-Liga belt. We thought at one stage there was going to be a change in the A-Liga belt because they got the draw, and he obviously scored the goal. It's a nice guy. Yeah. I do think he meant to cross it, though.
Do you? I don't think so.
Really?
No, I don't think so at all.
Let us know in the comments. Did he mean to cross it or not? Why do you say no?
I don't think he had time to look up. I just think he was in the box and he decided to have a swing at it. And it was off no backlift as well, which was really impressive. Like, he had no run up to the ball. His sort of avenue to goal was blocked off, and then he just had a swing with his... I mean, it's a bit lucky, but it's not... I think it was a shot.
Yeah.
Anyway.
3 Happy Carrots just on XG, expected girlfriends, says, mine's like 3.2 girlfriends a lifetime. I consider it success. A monogamous man. Good to see. Well, or not.
Trinogamous.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I haven't. I said a monogamous man. 3 Happy Carrots. You might be a woman, or you might not be gender specific. Whatever you are. 3.25 girlfriends, as long as they're quality.
3.25 Happy Carrots.
Yeah, as long as they're quality, I think that's great. How you get a 0.25 girlfriend, not sure, but let's not go into that anymore. Angelo tries to explain his 3.25 girlfriends at night by saying, I play a 4-3-3, very attacking. Again, Angelo, I'll be honest with you. I'm not fully picking up what you're putting down, but I like the attempts, so I'll probably keep reading them out.
He follows the Dutch style, he's the national curriculum, if you will, if you'll allow me.
Jamie McLaren, the 10 game run of him scoring comes to an end. He's one of the most successful strikers in Australian football. He's kind of, in the Socceroos, maybe not starting 11, but he's in there. I'll just say this. He doesn't move me. And I know that, it's harsh. Like, he's an amazing striker. He clearly scores lots of goals. I don't really get excited to watch Jamie McLaren play football. Is that wrong, Josh? Am I missing out on what is a wonderful player? Because the stats are there, but I just, he's scoring. He could have scored 15 games in a row. I don't think it would have, got my heart racing.
I agree. He doesn't set my pulse racing either. Partially it's because he's not very involved in the game. You kind of forget he's there, and then he scores, and you go, of course, Jamie McLaren scored.
Yeah.
I think part
And
of
they're
it's
not spectacular goals. They're
not
penalties, they're
generally. He
tap-ins.
very rarely scores from outside the box. I think he's only scored like
Yeah.
one goal from outside the box in 3 seasons or something.
Yeah.
Ridiculous, maybe 2. Um, look, if you compare him to the other great strikers of the A-League era, who is there? Like Besart Berisha, one way or another, Besart Berisha made you feel things.
Yeah.
Just because of his fiery personality on the field, and he was always involved in some way, shape, or form, whether it was turning defenders and doing brilliant things, or whether it was screaming at his teammates or the referee, or diving or getting sent off, or he was always present. He was always a character, a protagonist, as the Spanish might say. Archie Thompson, I think, had his certain charisma in the way he played. He was also more likely to drift out wide or run with the ball. He
had a bit of a dribble on him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he played as a winger for a lot of his time at Melbourne Victory, or at least like a roaming forward as part of a front two with Allsop. So, yeah, I think McLaren, in contrast, is so limited in what he does. He's so good at it, but also part of it is because he plays for Melbourne City, which, partially that it's a smaller fan base than some of the biggest in the A-League. They're not up there in terms of crowds and devoted followings, but also it kind of feels like the default outcome when Melbourne City win a championship, just because of the huge structural advantage they have as part of the CFG. So it seems like a fait accompli when he scores, because it's like he's part of the machine. That's how I feel about it. It just feels a little bit soulless, and that's not fair, because he was awesome at Brisbane Roar before he left and went to Europe. But that's how it feels.
You know what? I'd say a great A-League player, but not a great A-League entertainer. And there are some players out there who aren't great A-League players, but are great entertainers. And probably coaches hate those players, especially because the media pumps them up. And coaches probably love Jamie McLaren because he's so consistent, so reliable, gets in the right areas.
I will say he's a better media talent than he used to be. He's getting better at sort of coining a quote. And he stirs the pot occasionally now and then, which I like. He's a bit less uptight in those settings, which that does help if you can cultivate a little bit more of an off-field personality. But this record, like 10 games in a row, is absolutely ridiculous. It reminds me of when Jamie Vardy went on a similar run in the Premier League. I think he broke the record against Manchester United, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
and he's sort of a slightly similar player to Vardy.
I'd say, similar type of player. Let us know. Does Jamie McLaren move you? Is there some beauty in his game that we're not seeing? Let us know in the comments. Blake Hampton says, greatest A-League entertainers 11. I smell content. That's a good off-season content. There's been some very entertaining players in the A-League over the years.
I got to say, Ronaldinho for the Wollongong Wolves was probably my old-timer. Yeah.
You know what? I'll admit right now, if an A-League team signed Ronaldinho tomorrow, I'd be in. I would be in. All right. I know he's well past his best now. He's in and out of prison, right? Yeah. Look, that's not an ideal preparation. But I've never loved a player so much, except for maybe Messi. Bear with me one moment. Josh, what was your thoughts on the Mariners getting the 5th win in 6 games against MacArthur on Friday night? 2-1 win. Are you going to leave me to do a Bill Simmons monologue here? That's what I'm sensing. No. Just go for it. I have to check on one thing in the house. But go. Tell me your thoughts on the Mariners this season. 5 wins from 6. A good win on Friday night. I mean, the more I watch the Mariners play, the more I feel that Nick Montgomery, not now, but down the track, is a legitimate Socceroos coach in the future. Like, he's done such a good job with this group of players, and the way that he impacts the game with his substitutions, not necessarily in this match, but across the course of the season. I mean, I guess Qual helps, but they're number 1 for goals scored by players coming off the bench by quite a long way, if memory serves. So he rotates the squad so deftly. It seems like every time he makes a change to the starting 11,
even if a player's just played well, like Thomas Aquilina coming in and out, he knows how to get the best out of these guys and motivate this young group. And they've got a really dynamic front too. I think there were a few eyebrows raised about the signing of Marco Tullio, who had, one of those CVs where you don't really know what to make of it, but he's really settled and coming into his own now. Obviously, Jason Cummings is an absolute masterstroke of a signing, but replacing the 3 defenders that left in the off season so effectively, with young players as well, like Triantis. I just hats off to him. Like, Nick Montgomery is the best coach in the A-League for mine.
Yeah, I feel like he would even, and I think he's getting a lot of praise. I feel like he'd be getting even more praise if he was at a big club than the Mariners, or he himself was a little bit more charismatic, entertaining. Like, he's a pretty quiet, reserved character, at least from what we see in the media, and kind of flies under the radar.
He's actually not bad. He's better in I've heard him on podcast before,
one-on-one,
a couple.
Yeah.
Okay. He's better when he has a little bit more time, like outside the press conference setting. I don't think he's too bad actually for a quote. He seems like he's going to be a dour character just based on his accent and the haircut that you can set your watch to, But I don't think he's quite like that. And I thought he came off really well in the All Access.
Yeah.
Just in terms of his halftime speeches and that. I wanted to run through a brick wall for him after that, and I'm sure all the players do as well. I just think he's class. I really think he's going to go into great things if this keeps up.
Yeah, and as I think spoke about last week, it'd be interesting to see because he does have a UEFA Pro license, which is very valuable in terms of getting any gigs in Europe. Some amazing comments coming in, not about the Mariners, not about MacArthur, but that's all right. This pod doesn't always have to stay focused. Ronaldinho's XG on a night out. Oof, don't think he's talking about goals. Angelo says, if Ronnie was my wingman, my XG is about 6 per game. Run Them Memes asks if I'm planning to take down that tree anytime soon. That's the Christmas tree that is still up in my house. I'm a conservationist. All right. I protect trees. My girlfriend tried to chop it down the other night, but I chained myself to it.
I thought you were keeping it up for Orthodox Christmas.
Yes. Yeah. Well, Orthodox Christmas is about the 6th of January.
I was giving you about an extra week or two's leeway,
Yeah. Next Christmas, getting in early. Jorge Lazo asks, is this the Casio version or where is the Rolex? That's a reference. I don't know if you saw this, Josh. Did you see Shakira's song about Piqué?
Oh, yes, I do. I do get it. Yep.
Oh my God. So Shakira, just very quickly, I know we should talk about Australian football here, but you've just got to get across this if you're anyone and anything. All right. Shakira, Piqué, obviously they're together. Then they break up. It's a very messy breakup. Shakira goes on this kind of YouTube series with this Argentinian producer. She releases a song, which is like a diss track, right? But, you think of diss tracks I don't know, Tupac and Biggie or Nas and Jay-Z or, I don't know, Drake and Meek Mill, something like that. Not like ex-wife and an ex-husband, all right? Like this, imagine you're their kids, right? She destroys him. She says you've got a Casio watch when you had a Rolex. You had a Ferrari. Now you've got I don't know, a Holden Commodore or whatever the car they used in Spain. And she's like, I
don't think she said Holden Commodore.
No, she didn't. I can't remember what the car was, but it was some shitty car, right? She's like, I'm worth 2 22-year-olds. It was crazy, right? But then she's made this joke about, she's made this comment about how she's a Rolex and now he's with a Casio. What does Piqué do in his new football league that he's created? Gets Casio to become the main sponsor of the league. One day later, just an incredible thing is happening in Spanish football. I'm just blown away by it. Piqué set up his own league. Iker Casillas is involved. Kun Aguero is involved. It's 7-a-side. They put the ball in the middle to start the kickoff and they sprint in. They do penalties MLS style. There actually should be a bigger conversation about what we can actually learn from that as the A-League. But absolutely insane things happening over in Europe with Spanish football. Back onto the Mariners. Sammy Silvera looked pretty good. Interesting. It's just another good young player that's coming through the Mariners. And is that more credit to, Hutch for his ability to, because so many times we've seen talented players in the A-League and the coaches don't trust them. They don't give them minutes. They don't put them in the right situations. It feels like Hutch knows how to do that
Monty?
quite well. Monty. What am I saying Hutch for? I don't know.
Another Mariners midfield legend has gone into coaching. Yeah, I mean, Silvera, he's had a weird career trajectory so far. But I'm glad he's come back because clearly it wasn't quite working out. And the Mariners is the best place for him at the moment. That was a slick turn. I think it was one of those counterattacks where he just spun somebody in the middle of the field and we threw a narrow gap. And I mean, we've been impressed with him for a long time. I remember a goal he scored. I think it might have been for the Mariners against Perth, perhaps, or maybe it was for Newcastle. Maybe it was his one Newcastle Jets goal, which was just amazing. Like nutmegged somebody, and like he's a Jet. He's only 22. He's got time. It's probably got to be the next couple of years where he establishes himself as a first team player. And there's actually a lot of competition for places in the Mariners. Like the midfield low NRI, but very, very high performance. I really like Silvera. I like any player who's willing to receive the ball in tight and take players on and dribble. And he's definitely one of those players.
Cummings had a good game. He's done kind of really well again this season. We didn't see him a lot at the World Cup, like in actual playing time. Do you think we see him more kind of in future Socceroos matches for the Asian Cup, or is Mitch Duke, because of his performances at the World Cup, really tied down that kind of number 9 spot?
It depends who the coach is, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a good point.
I mean, if Graham Arnold's still the coach, Mitch Duke is going to keep playing a lot. I think there's too much up in the air with the Socceroos at the moment. I mean, until Arnie's contract extension is signed, sealed, and delivered, I don't know if we can say anything definitive or even speculative about Socceroos selections. But if I was the coach, I'd want him a bit more involved. He was a bit underwhelming at the World Cup, but very limited minutes.
Yeah. Lazar11 says Monty made up imaginary Tulio haters in the post-game interview. Lol. I do love when A-League coaches act like there's some, huge agenda against them or some player. It's like, you're the Mariners, all right? Be grateful anyone's taking an interest in you, okay? You're a good coach, but come on, bro. What do you think? Are you a Tulio hater, Josh?
Look, if it gives them added motivation, sure. What a fraud, Marco Tullio. You're just a shit Marco Tilio. No, I think he's good. I think he's very good. And he's 24, which was a stunning revelation to me. I thought he was like 30, but he's only 24, which I think the Mariners have also shown the value of getting some foreign players in who aren't 35 or 36. Like all these foreign guys, they don't have big reputations or anything, but they're all like 25, 26, 27.
Yeah, it's a good point. 3 Happy Carrots makes the point. Before I forget, on MacArthur, their crowd was the biggest ever non-derby crowd, 4.8K, even bigger than their first ever game in 2020. Credit where credit is due. Yeah, look, hopefully we're seeing an uptick in MacArthur. You want it to be a bit more than 4.8, but hopefully it's a trend, and next time it's 5.2, and then it goes on to 6 and 7 and 10 and whatever. So hopefully, Arzani came off the bench. Do you think? I mean, I thought they looked a lot better when Arzani plays. I think they look a lot better when he's on the field. It was great work from him to do like a little sneaky assist on the set piece, and even better work from the cameraman to somehow like have a close up on Arzani's face, catch Arzani giving the corner taker the eyes. And then do it. Let's go. And, the set piece worked out really well. They didn't win the game, but it was a nice moment for them. But on Arzani, do you think he's going to get his place back in the starting 11? It seems like him and
Drew or Toure?
So, yeah, Toure is holding that spot.
I'm not a fan of Drew and Toure starting at the same time because they both kind of pace merchants who want to get in behind. I feel like you have to have someone who wants to drop and receive the ball, which, I like Arzani for that reason. But clearly, Dwight York is trying to send a message that he's not an automatic selection. I think he's really big on, effort in training, that sort of stuff. And he's spoken like every time, someone asks him a question, which gives him a golden opportunity to big up Arzani. And I noticed that this at the start of the season, even when Arzani was in really good form, he didn't really take the bait. I thought that was interesting. Interesting sort of subtle negging for Zani, because he's just like, oh, well, his defensive work rate isn't that good or whatever. And I hate it when people on Twitter say that, but when it's his coach, I think it's a bit more valid. So, yeah, I'm not sure when we're going to see him back in the starting lineup, because you obviously got Craig Noon in that wide position as well. But I think the team is better with him on the pitch.
All right, let's now cross live to Ballarat, where our correspondent Joey Lynch is standing by. Joey, you've been in Ballarat today. Can you confirm the copycat went to school and got a smack?
Oh God, that's a nursery rhyme, isn't it? I didn't see any children being beaten while I was in Ballarat, I'm afraid, Nick Stoll. So I cannot tell you whether any mimicry here in Ballarat has been met with corporal punishment.
All right. Give us your thoughts first on the game, Western United and Newcastle Jets.
It was a frustrating game. Like, both sides had enough opportunities to win the game. Both goals. All right, let's start with both goals. Both goals were great goals. I mean, the Western United goal, moving down the left flank, the interplay between Lachie Wales, Josh Riston and Connor Payne. Didn't know they all had it in them, especially given that, Josh Riston was just making his first start on the left this season with Ben Garuccio out for 6 weeks. That was a great strike. And then Daniel Steins just receiving the ball, knocking it to his right. Admittedly, Jacob Tratt standing off him like he was just dumbstruck by something that Daniel Steins had done, but to still knock the ball to his right and bend it back in the way he did, taking into account the wind and everything, fantastic. But from then on, both sides had they were creating chances, they were creating half chances. In the case of Daniel Steins' cross late on to Trent Bahagia, they were creating glorious chances, but just they couldn't convert. They didn't have that final touch. And in the end, it was a bit frustrating watching that, because I was thinking these sides are going all right, but they can be doing a lot better than this in the final third. So I ended up frustrated watching it.
Angelo asks, wow, is that the new James Bond? 3 Happy Carrots says, in it, can't take the British out of Joey. Then there's some, are you Bon Jovi? Alan Riley has some advice. He says, Joey, get off the phone while you're driving.
I'm parked.
Yeah, exactly. Come on, Alan. It's all.
I tell you what I'm doing. I have parked here. I'm in the car park. I'm going to talk shit for a little bit, and then I'm going to disappear from video, because I'm going to go in and get myself a burger, and then I'm going to come back out and I'm going to turn off the camera and just do hands-free on the drive back.
There you go.
Is that Mark Milligan's burger joint there, Joey?
Carl's Jr.
Yeah, given he was deputising this week.
That is awful.
That's terrible.
Awful.
Hey, Joey, as you said, amazing goal from Steins. Is there any kind of signs that he's going to kick on now? We've been excited by him before, but is he going to get an extended run of games, do you think, the team? Can we hope to see more from him?
I think we can hope to see more from him. It's going to be interesting to see, given that Arthur Pappas in his post-game press conference indicated that Brandon O'Neill and Callum Timmins will both be coming back in to the squad, most likely for their game against Western Sydney next week. Mark Natter as well, but obviously not a lot of competition for places between Mark Natter and Daniel Steins. But I saw enough today, certainly, especially in that opening half, where I'm just thinking you do want to give him an extended run. Of course, wasn't as electric and active in the second stanza, I didn't think, but he also put the ball on a platter for Trent Bahagia. So,
what a miss.
It was a remarkable miss. I mean, I think in general, he's already built to be a bit of a TNC favourite, given that he's an intelligent lad that wears his socks low and all of that sort of stuff. But I would like to see him get a bit of a run at things, because I I think I did rate him when he was even with Perth, a bit more than even some Perth watchers did. But I mean, can we expect him to kick on and really improve? That can be said for most of this Jet squad because they have underperformed. I mean, we did their report card last week. They have underperformed significantly, but I don't know. Pappas today saying that he saw enough from today to, that they can build upon a foundation, coming to Ballarat and taking a point. He thinks they can build on this as a foundation. So, I mean, maybe they can. I mean, hopefully they can find that entertaining football again.
Josh, they're 3 points off the top 6. Are the Jets going as bad as we think?
I don't think any team is going as well or as badly as you think. The table's really close. Like, it's hard, actually, to come up with any compelling narratives out of this season because it's so inconsistent. The only thing we can really say for sure is that Melbourne City are probably better than everybody else. And the Mariners are outperforming expectations. That's about all you can really conclude from this year because the table is so tight.
It's mediocrity.
It is.
Mediocrity.
It is. But any team could go on a run and get into the finals. 6 teams make the finals. Just on Steins, I mean, you're right. He is uniquely designed to be a TNC sentimental favourite because not only for the reasons that you mentioned, Joey, but also he's had a spell in NPL Victoria. And for me personally, seeing him do the Luca Toni celebration, obviously that's going to curry favour with Nick Debano for clear and obvious reasons. But it's also the same celebration that I used to do after I scored in Year 8 futsal. Like, I used to do that every single time.
That is amazing.
So I don't know. I'm surprised Daniel Steins is old enough to really remember Luca Toni. But anyway.
He was born in 98. I was looking this up. He's born in 98. So he would have been 8 years old in 2006. So that's kind of prime, your first World Cup. You get massively obsessed with it. You do the Luca Toni. Maybe he was a big Bayern Munich fan, which he joined afterwards. But can I just say, one of the great celebrations. So well done to Daniel Steins for bringing that back into. I think more A-League players should either establish their own celebration or, with the greatest respect, if you're not going to score regularly enough, do impersonations of famous celebrations back in the day, tribute acts to goal celebrations. Joey?
Well, I mean, just on that, I would love to see somebody needs to do the Peter Crouch robot. Somebody needs to just adopt the classic, just the Alan Shearer, the runoff. Yeah. But I've got to be thinking, which A-League players do have signature celebrations? There's Brandon Borrello does it well, active. Brandon Borrello does his flips. Craig Goodwin does his sliding on the knees and pointing to the sky. I think McLaren's got like his cross hand symbol thing.
Oh, Goodwin's doing a Fernando Torres.
Yeah.
That's what he's doing. That's a tribute act in itself.
Oh, there you go.
That's why he's going so well.
So a tribute to Liverpool Torres, not Chelsea Torres.
Well, Atletico Madrid Torres, I would think.
But who else has a signature celebration?
I don't know. Let us know in the comments if anyone that you can think of has an active player has a celebration. Hey, Joey, Prijovic, he got injured during the game. Is there any word on kind of how serious that injury is?
Word is that it's a shoulder injury. So he actually came into the game complaining about his shoulder and then he aggravated it just past the hour mark and they brought him off. So not a lot of definitive word about the nature of the shoulder injury. However, Aloisi was talking about maybe we'll get scans. We'll see how it pulls up. But they've got a trip to Hobart next week. They're hosting Sydney FC. From what Aloisi was saying, now, of course, we know coaches lie. One of the biggest problems is that a lot of coaches don't lie very well. But in this case, Aloisi didn't sound too distraught about what had happened to Prijovic's shoulder. So even if he does miss the game, I'm not expecting this to be a catastrophic shoulder Rico, Wayne Carey taping up the shoulders type area.
Oh man, way back in the day when I was a kid in Melbourne, we used to tape up our shoulder just to look like Wayne Carey. Who it should be said,
hopefully that was the only way. Hopefully that was the only way you tried to replicate Wayne Carey.
Well, it was 1999, and the stories hadn't yet come out. Wayne Carey, a terrible human being. Let it be put on the record. As people have pointed out in the comments, Cummings has a celebration. It's the Joker of the hand, which is very cool. But he scores enough to have his own regular celebration. I'm saying for the guys who don't score enough, you do tribute acts. And a really good one that someone put out there, I think it was Tim, said someone should do the Jimmy Bullard telling off celebration, the famous Jimmy Bullard at Hull, where I think Phil Brown was the coach that he was impersonating, who would, I don't know, did this performative tell off the team in front of the fans. The last time they'd gone to Man City or whatever, an amazing celebration. So someone should do it. Run the Memes says Sharon violation. That's true. We are guilty of that. Look, let's move on from Western United versus Newcastle Jets, and let's talk about Adelaide, Melbourne Victory. So here's a question I just wanted to propose to you. The first goal that Adelaide score, it's an amazing run from Ben Hallett. And, well finished off by Craig Goodwin, and Craig Goodwin gets all the plaudits. Is Ben Halloran the most underrated player in the A-League? Josh?
Well, not by us. I mean,
No.
Ante bigged him up for years, and ever since this podcast started, he's probably the longest running meme on this podcast is Comrade Ben Halloran. Like, that's from the before times. But yeah, he doesn't get a lot of spotlight.
He doesn't get Socceroos speculation.
No, never.
He doesn't get Johnny Warren medal speculation. He doesn't even get, obviously the best player on Adelaide, because that's Craig Goodwin. But consistently, he massively improves that team. Consistently, I'm excited to see him play. Consistently, he does things in games where I'm like, you are a class above a lot of, not all of the players in the A-League, but a lot of players in the A-League.
Yeah. And I don't think Adelaide are under any illusions as to how important he is. I think probably in Adelaide, he's rated a lot higher. I know there was a fanfare that greeted his contract extension when he decided to come back from worst career. That was a magnificent run, but I will say that the Melbourne Victory defending on that goal was pretty statuesque. Like, I don't want to ruin it, but they didn't put in a convincing challenge that he really had to skip past. He looked effortless because it was pretty effortless. Awesome finish from Goodwin as well on his right foot. It wasn't until I saw like the reverse angle from behind the goal that I realized just how far in the top corner that actually went. It was an awesome finish. It was just the quality of the goals this weekend was really, really high, I thought. I mean, there's so many stunning goals. We'll talk about the D'Agostino goal in a minute, I imagine, but we mentioned Steins, Lockie Wales with a fantastic hit for Western United. There's
Borello's
so much
counter-attack goal.
Yeah.
Van der Ven. If he meant it, it's an amazing goal.
Absolutely. There's been a number of fantastic goals this weekend. And I was a little bit disappointed by how passive Adelaide were after scoring early. I mean, this is sort of Carl Vart heritage, but he wasn't even on the touchline this time, so I can't make my human handbrake jokes. They really took the foot off the gas, and I think Victory were there for the taking, and that's 2 points dropped.
Blake Hampton also ports out Joe Lolly's goal was amazing. We will get to that later in the thing. So a really good weekend for goals. Alan Riley, just on the Halloran thing, says that Halloran to Goodwin combo is absolute cash money. It's probably one of the best combinations in the A-League, actually, in terms of the quality of players. You know what? I actually think it's a pretty good result for Victory, given the week that they had. D'Agostino, like he said, what a goal that was. He can hit them. Like, he can hit a stunner every now and again. 3.25 happy carrots. Well done for changing your name so quickly. D'Agostino should do a dagger celebration. Wave a pretend bronze dagger around like in RuneScape. There you go.
That's a deep cut.
That is a deep cut. I don't even remember RuneScape. But and as we welcome back Joey into the conversation, Joey, how did you think that match went from Melbourne Victory's perspective? Because they're obviously struggling, bottom of the table. Adelaide doing decent this season. 1-1 draw away, not a bad result.
It's absolutely not a bad result given the week that they have gone through and everything that has been happening at the club. I mean, I do have to concur with the sentiment that Adelaide really took their foot off their throats at the most inopportune time when you just see the way that they sized through them for the opening goal. You sort of got the feeling, oh lordy, have Victory down tools. At this point, it was, really, you were really thinking, well, if Adelaide kick on from this point, they're going to grab 2 or 3 or 4 inside the first half. But Victory, yes, they got a goal. It was a wondrous goal. I'm still not convinced surrounding. I mean, Victory's biggest problem this season hasn't actually been taking shots. They're actually pretty high up in the league standings for shots taken, shots on target. They just don't create high opportunity shots. They're often getting blocked away, and even when they do get high quality chances, they're really poor at taking them. And so they didn't create a lot of really good chances. And I mean, if you want to try to make Dagger's goal a replicable one that you're going to do week in and week out, good luck with that. But I get the feeling that this week, the fact that they didn't lose, the fact that this was the last game they'll have to do without any form of away fans in the stands, albeit away fans in the future won't be able to congregate together, but they'll still be there. I think you can't look a gift horse in the mouth at the moment, and you've got to say the point almost as good as it probably could have been, especially after that early goal.
We often joke here on TNC that we are in fact a food podcast. But then we think, we should talk less about food and more about Australian football because that's what the people want. Well, it turns out, according to the comment section, that is not what the people want because all they care about is how's the tomato in the burger. That's from Yee. Tim Scott, I hope Joey shows the burger. Carrots, how's the lettuce in the burger? Tim Scott again, Joey better show us the burger. Run them memes. It'll be something disappointing like a veggie burger. He said, can I have half a burger, please?
Half.
Did Joey say thank you when he got his burger, Torres? So Joey, take us through the burger, please.
It's the unboxing, or should I say the unbagging?
You need to unmute yourself.
I will unmute. You've got to let me get to my car. And then I will take it. It is a superstar with cheese.
Okay, great. Don't know what that means. Maybe Ben Halloran can rebrand himself as a superstar with cheese. But
I think actually Jamie McLaren's the superstar with cheese because he's just scoring tap-ins all the time.
All right, we'll let Joey get to his car, get settled in, unveil his burger, so you incredibly weird people can watch him eat it and watch him dissect it.
This is actually one of those Korean food channels where we just watch people just gorge themselves. Actually, I would sign up for that. Maybe
the views are going to go through the roof. We should, just before we pivot onto Victory Sanctions, which we will get to, I want to say Jay Barnett. There's a name I haven't heard for a while. Popping up off the bench. I genuinely totally forgot that he even played for Victory. I remember when he was kind of regularly playing for Victory in one of their worst seasons ever. And I just kind of totally forgot about him. It made me think of Gianluca Iannucci, who I believe is at Green Gully now. Is that correct, Josh?
That's
how did he go at Green Gully? Because he was always someone in his very brief cameos that I thought was, this guy's a good player.
He's been good for Green Gully. He scored an awesome goal in the Australia Cup. People might remember, and they made the national stages. He's been really eye catching. Sometimes because NPL Victoria is like such a physical league, sometimes he gets sort of kicked out of games at times because the refereeing is quite liberal, I would say. Which is one of the reasons we like it. But when he's able to get on the ball and create, he's one of the best wingers in the competition. In terms of Jay Barnett, I've watched him in NPL 3, and he doesn't really stand out even at that level.
Wow.
I know that's a horrible
We've said some harsh things in this pod.
I know that's mean.
He does not stand out.
It's my honest opinion.
3. Yeah, you got to say it.
It's my honest opinion. I've watched so many other players in that Victory setup at that level of football, And if I didn't know who Jay Barnett was from his first team appearances, I would not have. He's not the guy I would have picked out and said, "Oh, he has to be elevated to the senior team."
Yeah. All right. Interesting. Because I was surprised to see him. All right, let's give the people what they want. Joey Lynch, let's make you full screen. Joey, describe the chips for us. Describe the burger for us. Describe the.
This
drink.
is not a sponsored segment, by the way.
No.
If Carl's Jr. wants to sponsor us, feel free. All right, the chips. Very
if
nice.
Carl's Jr. wants to sponsor us, make better burgers.
Chips, very nice, very chunky, lots of salt like those. All right, the burger, the superstar with cheese. It's huge.
Okay.
The size of my head.
It's a big head.
I do have a big head, Nick Stoll. Right.
Hey, we know that.
Yes, there is the burger. We have 2 patties.
Please comment if you're actually interested in this. I cannot actually believe that this is what I'm doing. You seem to be, so just make sure.
Hey, this is viral TikTok content, Stoll. Don't underestimate this. Blokes reviewing burgers in their cars is a massive part of internet subculture now.
I mean, the main event is here. There's thoughts on the quality of the tomato slice.
Oh, that's a top slice.
Yeah,
that's not even a proper tomato slice. That is a rip-off.
Yeah, Carl's Jr., explain yourself.
No, hold on. I like the top of the tomato.
Nah, oh my goodness.
Get out of town.
The asshole of the tomato.
It doesn't have the seeds. You want the seeds. That's where all the flavor is. Did you not see the...
I like the skin. I like the skin.
Sometimes, actually, with the tomatoes, you should blanch them, which is a process to take off the skin so you can enjoy it without the skin.
What? I like tomato skin. Tomato skin is nice.
All right. Angelo's asking, is there egg in it?
That's like the end slice. Do you like the end slices in a loaf of bread, Joey?
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Joey, I do not understand your tongue. There's something wrong with your tongue. Tim Scott says, amazing. Carrot says, don't stop Joey. Daniel says, the tomato looks so sad.
I agree, Daniel.
Why? Look, Daniel says Carl's Jr. in the mud. There's an incredible amount of comments. Tim,
it tastes good. Tastes good.
What would you give it out of 10?
1 sec.
He needs a second bite. We need some dramatic music underneath him here. Come on, Joey. Give us a rating.
Bearing in mind that I'm a very harsh judge.
What are you talking about? You say like the end of tomatoes and you like the end of bread. All right, whatever you rate it, I'm saying the opposite.
I'm giving it a 6.5.
6.5.
6.5.
For comparison's sake, I'd give a quarter pounder a 6. So I'm giving this a 6.5.
There you go. Get to your local Carl's Jr. Stephen Paletti says the end slice on the bread is great. Crunches up a lot better for toast. You guys have no idea. All right.
You don't eat it for toast. You just eat it raw. The end slice raw. It's great.
Bro. That is not prison.
The only thing the end slice is good for is breadcrumbs.
Yeah. Oh, yes, Josh. Good. Using all the ingredients, maximum. I like that a lot. Wow. A lot of people giving it an 8.5 out of 10, even without actually tasting it.
You haven't lived if you think a Carl's Jr. is 8.5 out of 10. Come on.
You know what? If you're in Sydney, may I recommend Umi Burger? There's one in Barangaroo and there's one in Darling Square. Unbelievable. The Lionel Messi of burgers and chips. The chips are just ridiculous. Umi, U-M-E. Got to text it out. All right. This is one of the weirdest.
Wait, is that a beer? Is that a beer and burger bar?
It's a Japanese burger
as well.
Yeah,
might have been there.
It's very nice.
We said under 90 minutes, Stoll, so we
can still make it. We can still make it. And look, while we're here, why don't we just mute Joey so we don't have to hear him chewing? And why don't we welcome to the pod Ben Smith? Ben, you're in Perth. You seem to have the lights on, which is better than Perth Glory did yesterday. We're going to get to that in a minute. How are you? And have you paid your electricity bill?
I have paid my electricity bill. Hello, Nick. Hello, Josh. Hello, Joey. Hope you're all doing well. Hello, viewers and listeners for the podcast. I have paid my electricity bill, but I may need to go to the toilet at some point, at which points the lights will go off. And I will make a hasty retreat to the bathroom.
All right. Ben, a couple of questions. Have you ever had a Carl's Jr. burger? What would you give it out of 10? And 2, apparently if you're in Perth, according to Lazar 11, go to Hood Burger.
Hood Burger. He corrects it in the comments.
Okay. Sorry, Lazar 11.
Hood Burger is good. Shout out Hood Burger. I've never had Carl's. I've had Hood Burger. It's good. Good burgers. Just Burgers, JUS Burgers as well. If you're in Perth and want a bit of a boutique burger, it's way better than grilled, which I feel like is
grilled
very
overrated. Overrated grilled. Jeez. Anyway, hey, I don't know how you're going to take this, Ben. This is maybe a compliment, maybe an insult. But Carrot says, Ben Smith, what a nice average name for an everyday gentleman. Have you had that before?
This might surprise you, but I can't say that I have. I don't think I've ever heard the expression everyday gentleman ever used in any context. It is a very average name. I don't know if everyday gentleman is a compliment or if it's just a nice roundabout way of saying I'm very plain and boring.
I don't know. Look, let us know in the comments your favorite name for an everyday gentleman. Look, we've had the burgers, we've had the chips, we've had Ben Smith. Let's get it back onto the football because there is a very serious kind of thing that we should talk about, which is Victory sanctions that happened this week, that were this week. $450,000 in fine, restricted seating and ticketing at games, suspended 10-point deduction, and the Melbourne Derby to be replayed with City leading 1-0. Josh, what was your reaction to these sanctions?
Look, my instant impulse was to get the opinion of people kind of outside the tent in Australian football, outside of the, the bubble, the soccer Twitter bubble that we live in. And the opinions I got from most of those people were, how on earth did they not get a points deduction? And honestly, if Victory are going to keep going the way they are this season, they've got very little hope of making finals anyway. So I don't really understand why Football Australia didn't slap them with a points deduction this season, in addition to the suspended sentence, just to make the point. I think it's a little bit soft. Yes, the financial impact is pretty huge. I think the active support restrictions are pretty much what we expected, but I think Victory have got off pretty lightly here.
Joey, what was your kind of takeaway from the sanctions?
Well, I think the financial penalties were probably the fine itself. I thought they'd get fined more, but then you actually read through the document and you realize, there's actually, you've written it there as $450,000 in fines, Nick Stoll. If you read through the actual release, it's like $150,000 fine. And then they got to pay $100,000 to these people to do this. And there's all up, it's $450,000 in fines and reimbursements. And then because of the lost revenue from the restrictions on seating and ticketing, it's another $100,000. So it's basically over $500,000 that has just in one fell swoop been blown out of Melbourne Victory's budget for a club already, as has been revealed from their accounts. A bit unfortunate for them that they're the only A-Leagues team that publicly have their accounts available, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. But I think the biggest point of contention for me also was the points deduction. And I don't have a problem. I've been thinking about this. In hindsight, I didn't have a problem with the points deduction being suspended rather than immediate. And I was a big fan of the fact that, based on my reading of it, it's not just a one-off suspended points deduction. It's you do something wrong between now and the end of the 2025-26 season, and it's 10 points each time. It's not just a one-off. I think that was a good idea. My problem when I was thinking about it was that it's an incredibly high bar to actually activate these suspended sanctions. The idea was, James Johnson said in his press conferences, they had built the sanctions to hurt Victory. This is me paraphrasing. They built the sanctions to hurt Victory, not kill them. And it was around behavioural change and, trying to make sure that they self-police and they work towards improving behaviour. Understandable. But the bar for these suspended sanctions is just so high. There pretty much needs to be another pitch invasion or an assault of a player or official or a coach for these suspended penalties to be hit again, based on my reading. Of course, Football Australia as the regulator might clarify, or they might increase the penalties whenever. That's their discretion. And also, one thing I really couldn't comprehend was that the suspended penalties can only be, James Johnson, in answer to my question, said that the suspended penalties were looking at the A-League men, as in, based on the answer that he gave, I don't think these suspended penalties will be activated for problems at NPL and A-League women's games. And if that's the case, I'm flabbergasted by that, given that 80-90% of the problems with Victory fans, as we have discussed on this pod previously, has come at NPL and A-League women's games. There was the Tegan Micah incident of fans throwing glass bottles at her during an A-League women's Melbourne derby. We had the Springvale White Eagles brawl earlier this year, numerous incidents in the NPL. The individual that threw the bucket at Tom Glover previously served a 5-year ban for being part of a group that attacked South Melbourne fans in 2016. So there is evidence of a direct link between fans misbehaving at the NPL level and then bringing that to an A-League's level. So I was surprised to see that the suspended sanctions didn't cover all of that.
We got a question coming in earlier on Twitter, contrasting the sanctions from Football Oz for Victory and Sydney United. Does a points deduction in the A-Liga have less meaning / relevance / penalty as there is no relegation? Ben, what's your kind of take on that?
I think if Melbourne were to have a turnaround in fortunes and did end up making the top 6, I mean, let's just remember half the league gets into finals. Like, I still think that is, there's obviously still meaning in a points deduction. I know the relegation isn't a thing yet, but, there's still finals to play for. And given the even nature of this league, where it feels like any team is actually in the finals hunt after, 10 games or whatever it is we've had, I think a points deduction would have been, would have hit them where it hurt. And I also think that I'm still kind of just surprised that there was no points deduction coming. For me, it just seemed like a no-brainer. It felt like everyone expected a points deduction. And then at the end of the day, it was just like, this seemed like the one thing that everyone kind of knew was coming, and then it didn't happen. And like Joey said, it set quite a high bar for future incidents.
Joey, your thoughts on this tweet?
I think with the Sydney United, you comparing the Sydney United sanctions, it feels like there's been a bit of horses for courses. If you were to sanction Sydney United in the same way as Melbourne Victory, i.e. hit them with the same sort of financial penalties that they've hit with Melbourne Victory, Sydney United would cease to exist. Sydney United had a $15,000 fine, I'm pretty sure, for their incidents. Now, there's the 30 points difference in terms of the points deductions that are hanging over the club's heads. But I think as a club administrator, you would rather have the points deductions hanging over your heads than what's the difference? 500. There's a $535,000 difference at minimum between the financial penalties between the two clubs. Now, I don't think Sydney United would trade 30 competition points in place of getting hit with $500,000 of financial penalties.
Josh, there was a lot of kind of confusion about this idea to restart the derby against City with City 1-0 up. There's a few comments made. Alan Riley said the limbs when Nanny scores a last-minute winner in the derby with a moon boot on and runs to celebrate with an empty North Terrace. Of course, Nanny started that game with his injury. He won't be able to say it. Tim Scott makes a point. I don't get why City didn't get a 3-0 win. Why do you think that was, and what's your take on that?
I think it may be to appease the broadcasters because it is one of the A-League's marquee fixtures.
I'll be watching.
Don't forget I don't forget that even though the A-League is separate from Football Australia, Channel 10 hold the rights to Socceroos and Matildas games. So there is a relationship there. So you have to preserve that. And like I would say like City probably deserved the 3-0 win based on what happened in most circumstances. You know, if that happened in like an NPL game or something, I'm sure that's what would occur. But you do have other commercial obligations, so it may have been just protecting themselves in that regard. I don't think it's the first time it's happened. I've seen games around the world replayed from certain points. I remember, I think it was when there was a goal scored in a Bundesliga game that didn't actually go in. Do you remember the Stefan Kiesling one where the header went through the side netting? I'm pretty sure they replayed that game from that minute mark when the goal went in.
Well, the famous one that I remember was way back kind of in 2005 or something like that. Real Madrid played a game, and I think it was 1-1, and there was
like
the
83rd
minute. It was 83rd minute, so there was 7 minutes to go. I think they were playing Villarreal, and there was a bomb threat to the Bernabeu, and so they evacuated everyone. And then the next day, they all turned up to replay the last 7 minutes of the game, and it was hugely controversial because guess what? Real Madrid scored to win 2-1, and it was a crucial game in the title race. And there was all this talk about whether they had someone had called in the bomb threat to give Real Madrid a better chance, and da da da. So it's going to be a very kind of interesting just experiment to see how this actually plays out. Imagine if Victory win. This game that they disgraced, or at least that their fans disgraced. Very, very strange one. But yeah, I've got to be honest with you, I am keen plays out basically.
Do they have to have the same players on the field if they're not injured, or can you pick a new starting 11?
I would imagine you can pick a new starting 11. Like,
but when they restart play with a drop ball, do they start it from the exact position where the ball was when the game was suspended? And everyone has to be in the same place on the field that they were?
Dario Vidicic expects it to restart with a goal kick to Tom Glover, because that's what it would have been prior to. That's what was about to happen before the pitch invasion. And you don't have to have
the flair has to be back on the same part of the pitch.
You don't,
and he has to throw it, but not into the crowd.
You don't have to have the same players, I believe, because I think Stefan Malk was actually popping up on Twitter talking about how he had a game restarted in the J2 this past season, and about how they didn't have to have the same starting 11s for that one.
All right. Well, another thing that was a little confusing this week was the statement from the active fans that came out. I'll read it out to you guys. On Wednesday evening this week, a collection of representatives from active supporter groups met with the APL executive to discuss our concerns and recent decisions. In the meeting, the APL heard directly from supporter representatives about how the decision to sell the grand finals impacted fans and proposals for measures in the future to ensure that supporters are recognised formally in the APL's decision-making processes. We can confirm that the APL has agreed to commit to the following action. 1, establishing a supporter committee by the end of the current A-League men's season 2022-2023 that will have a voice on future decisions made by the APL relating to fans. That's an odd one for me, by the way, just because I imagine pretty much every decision APL makes somewhat relates to the fans. So how that is defined is going to be interesting. APL confirmed that they are currently searching for an independent chair and independent director for the APL board. The APL has a provisional deadline for an appointment set by the end of 2023. Agreed to consult with supporters on future decisions regarding selling the grand finals, incorporating the feedback into the review of the current partnership towards its conclusion, and agree to meet periodically with the collective active supporter group representatives to discuss progress made regarding the above targets. Both parties have committed to working together collaboratively moving forward to ensure these targets are met. Protesters by the active supporter groups will cease indefinitely, providing the above targets remain on track to be achieved in the time frame outlined. We thank the APL for their willingness to engage with our representatives and taking our concerns seriously by committing to future action. Just my kind of take on this is that it's sad that it sounds so corporate. Like, I expect the APL.
Who wrote this statement?
I have no idea, but it is at least co-signed by the logos of all the active supporter groups, bar Melbourne Victory's original style Melbourne, for obvious reasons. So, for whoever are these active supporter group representatives, have clearly signed off on this statement, I haven't seen any active supporter groups come out and say, "I don't know, we never agreed to this statement." So, my understanding is that they all have agreed to this, and yeah, I guess I was disappointed that it was just so, like, it sounded like a corporate statement that you would get from an APL, a Football Australia, a, corporation. This doesn't sound like supporters, and that to me was disappointing. And I was surprised that, look, if they agree and they're happy with the status quo and they're happy with kind of the agreement that they've come to with the APL, then good, and then everyone can move on. And who am I to say otherwise? But I don't know. I was surprised that it reached this conclusion and that they kind of didn't demand more. Josh, what was your take?
I think all appetite for continuing the protests ended as soon as the first Melbourne Victory fans invaded the pitch. I think the high ground was lost that night. The momentum was lost. Without Victory's actives as part of it, the protests become quite a lot less vehement. But also, I think this is a bit limp. Look, this seems like a box ticking exercise for APL. What I am interested in is if the representatives that are on the supporter committee will have some kind of public-facing presence. Will they put out statements if they disagree with an APL decision? Will we get some of them as sort of talking heads in the media when big decisions are made? Can they lobby publicly that way? Or is this just a really opaque thing that we'll never see the inner workings of whatsoever? And how are these supporter groups like electing those representatives? Like, I'm really interested in that. Are they just like, is each active fan group like doing a Facebook poll? Like,
yeah, and it was interesting as well because I saw there was quite a few fans, at least on social media, who were saying, this doesn't speak for me. Maybe the non-active fans need to unite, and I think they felt a little bit let down. Lazar 11, lame statement. What a waste of time. Alan Riley points out, was speaking to the guys from the Red Army, and they said they got more than they expected from the meetings. So that's an interesting one. Ben, what was your read on this situation?
Just as I think Josh said, like, it's limp. I mean, I wasn't expecting, to be honest, like, I think the moment that Victory fans decided that they were going to storm the pitch, it felt like any hope of getting that grand final decision reversed died in that moment. And it feels like, like you can just sense the deflation around the league. And it feels like the supporters groups who are kind of still, carrying on the fight are doing so out of kind of like, well, we're committed to starting it. We're committed to finishing it, rather than, it feels like a sense of apathy has kind of affected the entire kind of counteraction to this. To be honest, like, it feels like a bunch of, individuals kind of coming together, but not really having a game plan, like a cohesive game plan or plan of attack to actually, bring to the table. And it's, it's very tough when you bring all like fans together from across a the country. And like you say, we don't actually know who these fans are. We don't know who was at the meeting, like how these spokespeople were elected, chosen. But to be honest, it's kind of also what I expected. Like, as soon as members from OSM stormed the field and decided that this is how we protest, it felt like, and even in the aftermath of that, it just felt like this was how it was going to end up, with a very meek supporter statement, because the supporters have realised there is no conceivable way that we can get the grand final decision changed now, and we're just kind of it almost feels like they're going through the motions. And for them, for this kind of this conglomeration of fan groups to be successful, they need to actually affect change, and I just don't see it happening at this point. I think, as everyone said, like, as soon as that derby storming the pitch happened, everything died. Any orifice of hope in that moment ended when a bucket was thrown at Tom Glover, and it kind of feels like a lot of fans feel the same way, and just every kind of protest since then has just not had the same cut through. Like, the Glory fans, I believe there's a group of Glory fans who actually aren't going to games anymore, and they're watching the games from a pub, but like hasn't really had the impact, because everyone's just kind of accepted defeat now. And I think big part of that was the horrific scenes of the Melbourne Derby. So yeah, it's just I think Big Sigh just kind of captures the mood, really.
Yeah, apathy is the word, isn't it? I mean, it's interesting that the APL was kind of, well, I don't know if they choose this path, but they won. They rode out the storm. Danny Townsend, Paul Lederer, all these guys, they rode out the storm. The narrative changed with, it's just still a negative image for the game, but it totally shifted the discussion when the pitch invasion happened. They essentially going to, pocket the money, and the protests have died. And that's not what we thought was going to happen at the time. There seemed like real energy and real anger, and this wasn't going away anytime soon. And they were going to be made to pay for this if they weren't going to overturn the decision somehow. Ink dry on the contracts or not. But because the focus has been shifted, they've essentially gotten away with one of the more indefensible decisions in Australian football history.
Matthew Pappas says via YouTube, there's a new group called Football Supporters Association Australia, which is meant to represent all fans. They have a website and social media platforms, a few hundred already on. So it's interesting that there's already kind of like, I don't know if that you'd call that a splinter group or just an independent group to the active supporter fans. Ben, do you know more about that?
No, in fact, my kind of, when I first saw that kind of email, or I can't remember if I saw it on email or it was doing rounds on social media, I actually thought it was the group of the 12 kind of supporters groups who were talking to the APL. So it's very surprising that we seem to have like an offshoot already. But I just don't know how much power this group will have. I don't know enough about them. They haven't been kind of front and center of the conversation in a way that
I believe one of their key members was in the live stream comments earlier in the show. So if you care to shed any light, please chime in.
Come on the show. Joey, you've kind of spoken or you've tweeted about this. Can you give us any more information or your take on the fan statement?
It's one of the things, like me and Teo obviously spoke at length about it last week, and like that statement previously talking about like 11 different groups getting together but with no real game plan. I mean, you can sort of even see that in the wildly divergent statements that they've made. I mean, last week we were talking about a statement that ended with "rest assured the APL will be held accountable," and then a few days later we get this corporate statement coming out, and that was predicated by the initial statement that went out. That one felt the most combination of professional but still passionate. Like, you could clearly tell that the Melbourne Derby had knocked the wind out of their sails, but there was a shifting in priorities, and they were going to try to get concessions out of the APL. it's been interesting. Like when that statement came out, obviously fired off an email to the APL. Should be getting an official statement from them during the next week. But just hearing some of the things, apparently hasn't been very well publicised, which maybe speaks to the disconnect between actives on Twitter versus general fans that maybe are more common on Facebook and the like, or just even not active on social media that much. There's been numerous meetings, apparently, with fan groups over the festive period and Christmas. A lot of them, like the APL put out the call to clubs. Clubs would organise meetings with fans, and that took place with fans and supporters setting the agenda, as was the case with this meeting with the actives. It was the actives that came in and set the agenda. And from what I can gather, these moves towards an independent chair, an independent director, moves towards establishing a supporter advisory group. These have already been in the pipeline for quite a while, which again raises the question of just what concessions were actually extracted at this one meeting between active support groups and the APL. It's a weird situation wherein these guys obviously wanted to come to the table and be engaged as a serious stakeholder, and you've got to pay heed to that and you've got to judge them by that, but also you've got to bear in mind the demographics of these active support groups, who these active support groups are likely made up of. Walking into a meeting with seasoned sport, I know people don't like him, but Danny Townsend is a seasoned sports executive that has been doing this for years and years and years, and has had to do negotiations with people that are a lot meaner and a lot uglier and a lot more visceral than the active support groups. So one wonders if how equipped active support groups really were to even gather any concessions from the APL. So, but that's been interesting. And yeah, I guess I'd also reiterate exactly what Josh said. How exactly will this advisory group be made up of going forward? Will it just be for actives, given that they make the most noise and they're the most visible, but they're a very small proportion of all supporter groups and all fans? How will they be elected? Where will the accountability be? Will we know who they are and what their views are and all of that sort of stuff? So it's going to be a very interesting time, because obviously this agreement, the statement put out by the active supporter groups, APL confirmed to me there was nothing inaccurate within that statement. It's what they've been working towards for a advisory group. There's no formal structure of what that will look like yet. There's no formal agreement or anything like that. So we're going to have to wait for the coming weeks and months for that to be announced and revealed. So that's going to be another interesting thing. And all in the meantime, the fans are going to be ceasing their protests. So I guess it's sort of like business as usual as we wait for the announcement of a supporter group advisory body.
Look, we're coming very close up to the 90 minutes where we have to give everyone back their money if we don't make it. Keep your comments coming in, though, even though we're in the last minutes of the show. We've still got a couple of games to touch on. We'll leave the fan statement stuff there. Some really good comments have come in via YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. Either Moment says, Ben Smith is definitely a right back kind of name. Ben, what position did you play or do you play?
Central midfield.
Oh, all right. There you go.
But I have moonlighted as a fullback and a centre back at times.
Oh, wow. All right. There you go.
That's like a real 2019 Bournemouth sort of name. Ben Smith at right back.
I think there was an Adam
Brad
Smith.
Brad Smith.
And another really good comment from Jack. He says, fuck you, ESPN Australia and New Zealand. Bring back Canada. Don't know why he's confused. I think ESPN Canada exists. Two things can exist at the same time, Jack. But maybe
bring back the nation of Canada. It's vanished.
Yeah.
No one knows where it's gone. And ESPN, presumably at fault.
I would assume so. We'll work on that as best we can. But look, let's talk about Perth 2, Sydney 2, blackouts and backouts. Look, we'll get to the game first. I thought Sydney FC played very well.
A bit graphic, Stoll. A bit graphic.
Well, a bit graphic because we got to talk about this moment, and I hope the audio gets picked up on this. But if you just allow me one moment to play this for you, let's just listen to what happened here.
Sure, well, it's not ideal. You see that our broadcast cameras have adapted almost immediately. Open the filter a little bit. I'm sure the players' eyes have adapted to it a little bit darker as well. Common sense prevails if we can keep playing it. Just have a listen.
Ruben Zadkovic here.
Yeah, go. I think you needed to hear that probably.
One of our players is about to shit themselves. Ben, do you have more on this being the Perth local? Can you explain who was the player that was about to shit themselves?
Well, to channel my Chris Kamara, I saw him go off, but I thought he was just been substituted.
There's a bathroom break, but for who, Ben Smith?
I don't know, has there?
Was there any confirmation on who that player was?
I don't think there was, because the first I heard of it was people asking me, do you know who needed it, the toilet during the blackout? And I actually felt like Chris Kamara at Fratton Park. I was like, I don't know, has there? Like, it was.
Let us know in the comments. Who do you
I've got an answer on this.
Right, go,
I've got a conspiracy theory, actually, because I've studied this footage like the Zapruder film. I've gone through it frame by frame, and I can only conclude that there wasn't just one player who went for a bathroom break. I believe there was a second shitter.
Oh. Two shitters. Yeah, look.
You can see him adjust his shorts back and to the left.
So, look, we have gone past the 90-minute mark, but it's for this amazing content. Tell me this isn't the highlight of the show.
If I had known this during the game, I would have asked Ruben about this in the post-game presser. But alas, I didn't hear about it until. Instead, our questions were more. Michael Ramsey from AAP asked Ruben what went through his head when the lights went off, and Ruben's response was, "This is A-League football."
He should have said, "This is peak A-League."
I wish he'd said peak A-League, but he said, "This is A-League football." It was one of the funniest moments I've been at a press conference for.
It was very MPL spec, actually, because they're playing at Macedonia Park, obviously. And there's a famous game. I hate to bring it back to MPL Victoria. Actually, I'd love to. But there was a famous semi-final between Avondale and Bentley Greens where there was a crazy comeback, finished 3-3, I believe. But the lights went out, and Avondale staged a comeback afterwards. There's this big delay, so we had massive added time. And Jonathan Germano, who people might remember from Melbourne Heart days, scored ridiculous free kick in the last minute. So just playing at the MPL ground and having the lights go out was like, this is football heritage.
I play at a university club, and we're very sadly notorious for our lights going off with about 10 minutes to go. And there have been more than a few occasions where the club president has had to phone the campus security and ask them to turn the floodlights back on. And it did feel a bit like that.
Yeah, look, but can you explain to us kind of the vibes that are happening now, kind of at Macedonia Park? And because I think at the start of the season, we were a bit worried for Perth Glory. We thought it's going to be another disaster. It does seem like there's, maybe the lights are going out, maybe players are shitting themselves, but there does seem to be a little bit of positive vibes about the place, or am I reading too much into it?
No, it seems like it's going quite well. It's a very interesting case study, and I think it's been a glimpse into what life might be like for Perth Glory if they do ever decide that the rent at HBF is too much. Tony Sage has been on the record multiple occasions about how HBF is a very expensive venue to rent. They would need, I feel, significant improvements if they wanted to play there. permanently. For starters, like the press box is actually the club room, and there's not much elevation, and the facilities would need a bit of a helping hand. But it's doing a good job in a bad situation, and I think Stowe and Macedonia have been very good hosts. The crowd atmosphere has been really good. Like the limbs in front of me when David Williams scored the header yesterday, were really good. By the atmosphere on Tuesday night against Brisbane was actually quite good. Apparently, there was a group of like teenage Glory fans who were causing a bit of a ruckus in a healthy way. The fact there were a few people on Twitter saying the Glory youth were doing a good job in the crowd. So it's been good. Yeah, good on them. Yeah, we always talk about the youth not getting a good run, and they're doing their chances no harm of repeat appearances. By the sounds of it, it's been from fans I've spoken to, it's been quite a good experience. I know there's been a couple of concerns that there's not the kind of temporary stands. There's not as much elevation as they would like.
The temporary lights that don't stay on the whole game. That's an issue.
It's also very windy at Macedonia Park, which is, it's probably 15 minutes from the coast, but most of Perth is 15 minutes from the coast. So just a bit of brag there, but it's been
must be nice.
Must be nice. It is nice. Went for a nice dip at City Beach last week. It was good weather. But it's actually really windy at Macedonia Park, and it's like catches you off guard. I think Glory even tweeted yesterday something along the lines of, "We're not your mum, but we'd recommend you bring a jacket or a sweater of some."
That's good stuff.
Even though it's quite, the days are quite hot, at night it gets quite cool, and the wind, like Perth is quite a windy city, I've found, but like even at night,
the rivalry with Wellington continues.
I've been to Wellington, and in would be autumn, and Wellington autumns are incredibly windy. Perth can't compete, but compared to like some cities in Europe I've been to, Perth is actually very, very windy, and it actually, especially in winter, the wind chill is a real thing. And I found some of the teams have kind of said Macedonia Park is a hard place to come because the facilities aren't what they're used to. The crowds
it's
right
hard
on
to
top
find.
of you.
It's covered in darkness.
Yeah, and then the wind as well. It rained. I think it was the Western Sydney game. It very briefly rained for 5 minutes, and you could see the rain illuminated with floodlights, and it was just swirling around everywhere. It was quite an experience.
Joseph asked, "Is this a weather podcast?" Look, interesting times at Perth. Josh, I want to talk about Sydney FC a little bit. I actually thought that first half was probably the best that they've played all season. Ben, I can see you're nodding as well. You were there as well. But Josh, what did you think of this kind of Sydney FC? We actually saw it was interesting, the lineup they went for as well. Burgess and Caceres. Usually he's gone for one or the other in the past. Robert Mack, Joe Lolly, Adam Lafondra, all there as well. Luke Braddon, the number 6. What did you make of Sydney FC's first half and then as they went on?
Well, I think for a lot of the season it's been, and we've spoken about it, kind of Lolly and Mac go Burr, and if that doesn't work, they don't really have a lot to answer with. But having Burgess and Caceres in the same lineup just gave them a lot more options. So I liked it a lot. I mean, Burgess was desperately unlucky not to get a goal when he smashed the crossbar.
Great ball from Mac, by the way, to put him through outside of the foot.
Yeah, really nice. But it's because Burgess is on the pitch that he's making that sort of run. Whereas the guy who came on for him in Palo Retre is very unlikely to do the same sort of thing, operate in the same areas of the pitch. So, I mean, I felt that substitution was probably where it started going awry for Sydney. Yes, they caught the goal early in the second half. I need to dig up some stats on Sydney's set piece defending as well. I'm not... My sort of eye test or gut says they have a problem in that area, but without seeing the numbers, I couldn't say for sure. But yeah, they put together a really strong first half. Should have probably scored another goal. But to give away a 2-goal lead at halftime never feels good, especially when it's the last kick of the game, essentially, that you can see the goal. So, Perth pretty good value for their second half comeback. Really impressed. And good to see David Williams back doing his thing. I remember I did an interview with him on FNR a little while back when he was playing in India, and there was a lot of COVID lockdown stuff going on, and they had like a bubble league happening. And the interview went for ages because I think he didn't want to stop talking because he was lonely.
Oh, that's nice.
He's such a nice guy.
David, come on the pod if you're lonely, my friend. Come on this pod. It goes way too long, and we talk copious amounts of shit.
But it's nice to see him back in Australia and scoring goals because he I think struggled to get another A-League contract, and obviously he was on good money in India and reticent to give that up. But I think some people thought his A-League days were behind him. Clearly not.
No, but he was so good back in the day at Wellington. Jess Summit says, Ben Smith is a great weatherman name. And then Carrot says, Ben Smith, Australia's best everyday weatherman. I agree. I think he'd be an amazing weatherman. I'm going to talk to Channel 9 about that. Ben, Matthew Pappas says via via YouTube, Sydney FC were woeful in the second half. What was Corica thinking taking off Burgess for Rattray when we needed to keep the ball was Pete Corica. This guy has no clue. He better be out by Monday. You got a chance to see Sydney out by Monday. He wants to give him the weekend. Wants to give him all of Sunday. But Monday morning, 9 a.m., you're out. Ben, what was your take seeing Sydney FC up close?
When Max Burgess went off, Mercury was definitely in retrograde.
Very good. Very good.
It's very good.
Yeah, I thought Sydney were a bit unlucky to not get 3 points. I thought they were a better team. Even in the second half, they had a couple of chances. Cameron Cook was kind of called on a couple of times to stop deflections from crossing the line. I think it was Robert Mack had a good chance in the second half where he kind of had the ball on a string in the box and just kind of shot wide. They definitely lost a bit with Burgess going off. It's actually harking back to the Macedonia Park press box, because there's not much elevation and you're set back a bit from a pitch. It's actually kind of hard to get a good kind of tactical understanding of what's going on, because you can't really see the depth, and the distance between lines at times. Plus there's one corner which you just can't see at all from a press box. So it was kind of hard to read, but I thought Sydney were, I thought they were a better team, especially first half. Second half, it was kind of even, but they still had their chances. I wondered pre-game whether Glory would put Aaron Gerd under pressure in defensively, and they didn't really have it. You didn't really get at him, I felt. I thought, Mac and Lolly looked really good. I thought Burgess did okay. First half, especially, Sydney's midfield just kind of kept the ball quite well and, pounced on turnovers as they do, set off on quick counterattacks. And Perth were better in the second half, but I never got this sense that they were right in this game. I never I think if that game had ended 2-1, it would have probably been a fair result. But yeah, Glory, I thought Glory had kind of been unlucky in a couple of games earlier this season, and hadn't got points where they may have deserved them, like the MacArthur game away where they were the better team and somehow ended up losing 1-0. So yeah, I feel like these things kind of...
This is A-League football, my friends.
This is... these things kind of work themselves out during the season. And I think Glory have been decent at home, not worse than any other team. So yeah.
Pappas says via YouTube, just looking at social media, all the Sydney FC fan support want Corica out. Don't know what the board is thinking. Why the hell did they give him a 2-year contract? Carrot says, if they sack Corica, who do they replace him with? We discussed that kind of last week a bit. Names thrown out were Ocon, Zrilic, Ufi Tale. Montgomery would obviously be one. I would assume he'd probably be moving on to bigger and better things, but that'd be an interesting one. So yeah, we talked about that a bit last week. And finally, there was a comment here: has Rodwell earned another season? From Angela. Absolutely not.
Where's
Availability?
Rodwell?
Yeah, availability is the best ability. This guy turns up one game out of 12. Like, man. He came with pedigree, but I think he's underperformed both at Sydney FC and the Wanderers.
Hey, when you come back with that haircut, you know he's on the beach when he's got the cornrows.
100%.
He's off the Bali, baby.
We'll go to the final game of the round, or at least the final game we haven't talked about. Brisbane 0, Wellington 1. RIP Brisbane Force. Yes. Since we discussed last week about Brisbane being a force, they've lost 2 from 2. Josh, you've termed Carl Viet the human handbrake. What's Warren Moon? Is he competing for the human handbrake kind of trophy? Because this team, there's a lot of handbrake on it.
I mean, Warren Moon is almost like a permanent caretaker in this setup at Brisbane.
God, it's a bad setup. It's true.
I can't help but think everything stems back to the ownership, and they don't really have the resources.
Yeah, that's it.
And they've been messed around with like different training pitches, and like they've gone down training to the Gold Coast, and then they want to go back, and then Chris Fong's in, and then Chris Fong's out, and then he's shaking it all about. No one knows what's going on in Brisbane. Warren Moon, I really like him I liked him as an NPL coach for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the Lions FC a pretty dominant force in NPL Queensland, but he molded them into that. And I had high hopes for him as a coach, but I feel like, I don't know, sometimes when you're in a situation like that, you kind of run out of enthusiasm and fresh ideas. And I didn't feel as if he was a particularly authoritative presence in the Charlie Austin All Access. I felt he came off as a bit of a substitute teacher vibe. It didn't feel as if he was really commanding the room. But maybe that's a outdated interpretation on my part of what a manager is. Like maybe it is a bit more of a collaborative thing nowadays, and you're not making the Braveheart speeches every week. But I find it pretty uninspiring. They still don't have a striker. Like, remember that sort of spell at Adelaide United where they went through about 17 different foreign forwards and they couldn't find one that stuck. Brisbane still haven't found a convincing option up front, and playing Mile Uznic on his own is the latest in a string of compromises, and that's what Brisbane feels like. It's a compromised team that's not really built to win.
Yeah. Look, 10 goals in 12 games, not the most inspiring football from Brisbane, but we should give a shout out, Ben, to Oscar Zwada, who scored 5 goals, I think, this season for Wellington Phoenix. What have you made of the Knicks so far?
I think, Wellington are one of those teams who I think are good. I don't know if any team apart from Melbourne City and probably Central Coast in this league are good. I think the Knicks are probably right up there with them. I've enjoyed watching them this season. It feels like previous years they were kind of the neutrals' favourite but weren't getting results. This year feels like they're maybe not playing quite as aesthetically pleasing football, but they are actually getting results. They're grinding out performances on the road, at home. The foreigners have really kind of settled in now and really are hitting their strides. Awada's been a good pickup. Like Bozadar Crea has been really fun. Just good times in Wellington right now. It feels like they're kind of slowly starting to mount a pretty convincing case for finals football. And I'd be embarrassed if I'd said they'd finish outside the top 6 this year.
Carrot says Welly are 4th now. They've really slipped under the radar. They haven't slipped under the radar, mate. This table is lying to you. Let's have a look at it. It's Melbourne Victory are last on 11 points. Western Sydney are 3rd on 19, 8 above. 3rd and last is separated by 8 points. Joey, is the table lying to us? Is there any other final thoughts you want to give us before we wrap up?
Of course, the table is lying to us. We've said, almost every team in this league is a differing shade of mediocre. It only takes 2 or 3 wins on the bounce before all of a sudden you're back playing finals football and potentially even challenging for a home final. And then once you get into finals, I mean, who knows what can happen? We saw Western United had to go the long way last campaign and they won the whole thing. So, yeah, the table has to be said to be lying to us at this stage. And every team is, I don't think any team is dead and buried yet. You've just got to sort of like try to pick out, all right, which teams have showed me that the fundamentals of what they're trying to do, there's at least scope for improvement. Or if what they're trying to do comes off really well, I can see them finding success with that system. So I'm looking at somebody like Western Sydney Wanderers. It's not pretty, but I can at least see what Marco Rudan is trying to do. And I know that if they do that well, they will be able to mount some sort of challenge. Meanwhile, I look at somebody like a Melbourne Victory right now, and you have your doubts unless they can figure out what's going on. I think more with their midfield than their attack. You have doubts about them playing finals football. So you really have to try to dig below the surface because the table really is lying to you.
Jess asked if you're in maximum security with no camera. We wish. No, he is driving right now. Guys, any final thoughts before we wrap up the show? We have gone a little bit over time, but we aim to keep it under 2 hours. I got to say, I have one incredibly hot take galaxy brain thought for the A-League that actually I'm not even going to share on this pod because I feel like the public is not ready for it. Like, it is that spicy. But Josh, you have anything final to say?
Oh, I just wanted, in order to, comply with our ACCC requirements, I just wanted to say that if people want to process their refund for this program of $0.00, go and follow us at TNC Football on Twitter and subscribe to the ESPN Australia New Zealand YouTube channel if you haven't already, and you'll get that check in the mail.
And rate us 5 stars. You will absolutely get that check in the mail. Personally, DM me your credit card number and that funny little 3-digit thing that's on the back of your card. Just for fun.
CVC, I believe.
CVC.
Yeah. Just this fun little 3 digits on the back.
And at this point, Nick is about to announce that TNC have actually struck a deal with the London Football Exchange, and so all payments will be made in Bitcoin.
And TNC legitimately makes more money than the London Football Exchange. All right.
And we deliver you utility for the token.
Exactly. Joey, any final thoughts?
I will take that as a no from Joey.
I'll take that as an absolute no final
The crickets, the dead silence of the end of a
right.
TNC episode.
All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a hell of a ride. We've talked about players shitting themselves. We've talked about lights going out. We've talked about sanctions, fan statements. Is there league? Do we have league? Is Ben Halloran the most underrated player in the league? So much. We couldn't have done it without you. We look forward to
the belt.
Go on.
The belt.
We spoke about it.
The women's belt.
Go. Speak to the women's belt.
The women's belt changed hands. Western United lost to Western Sydney Wanderers. That means that we have a new A Liga Femenina belt holder. And we are going to give it Western Sydney Wanderers Bolden, the Philippine international. Stadge takes the belt. Stadge's stable takes the belt. Alana Chern. It's remarkable. Both our Western United belt holders this season have lost their belts in games where they didn't actually play. Alana Chern not featuring against the Wanderers, losing it to Bowl. Yes, so that's the thing. And we didn't discuss A-League Women's, but I don't know.
Tune into the Far Post, our stablemates at ESPN for that. Enjoy your week. We hope to see you next Sunday. But until then, from me and the whole team, thanks and success.